We are coming in right live right now. After all our tests before, the music was not playing on our side, so we can't hear it. But welcome everybody. We got Erica and Jeff. We're going
That's
right
okay,
through our
Dwight.
episode.
That's okay, Dwight. We get to miss our dance party today, sadly, I guess. Technology glitches. We're always so happy for the gift of today that we always start off with a dance party, but that's okay. We'll get right into it. Welcome back, Risers and Thrivers. I like that, Jeff. Welcome back, Risers and Thrivers. We are so happy to have you with us again today on the Rise Today Inspirational Podcast. We would love to know, share with us where you're calling in from, how your day is going, and how you are feeling today. I hope it's a 10 out of 10 day. Boy, do we have a show for you today. We hope you really loved the last show where we featured the former Minister of Health from Manitoba. What a show that was. Check it out on Apple or Spotify or any of your favorite streaming platforms. Our show is humbly brought to you by Popped Collar Productions, and we are so grateful for this sponsorship to be able to bring you all of these stories that we love to bring you and to really open up the conversation about hardship and adversity and to really share tools to stay the course, resilience tools to live with more optimism, resilience, and joy. And boy, do we have a show for you today. We have Jeff Walker with us today, and he just represents everything that we strive to bring you on this show. He is an exemplary human, and I can't wait to share with you all that he brings. So Jeff had a stroke at the young age of 48, and this stroke has propelled incredible awakenings and mindset shifts in how he lives his everyday life. And it is a feat that he is here with us today and alive and well and thriving. And through all of his adversities, he embarked on this journey of personal healing and growth. And he now phenomenally inspires other men to do the same. He has a men's recovery group, and he is just an inspirational human wide and far. So I can't wait to introduce you to him. Jeff Walker, welcome to Rise Today Inspirational Podcast. We are humbly very grateful to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
Oh, gosh, Jeff, thank you for being here and sharing your time with us. I know you're busy. Jeff is a leader at the senior care home, the adult foster home. And on top of everything else he does, he just has care written all over his heart. He is just a phenomenal guy, and I can't wait to dive right in. So let's get going. Okay. Jeff, tell us, take us back to your life before this stroke. Kind of give us a picture of what that really looked like.
Well, life pre-stroke was very much hustle and bustle. I worked, at the time I was working 2 jobs, and, doing things and looking at the family. I have elderly mother, and, so I would do things for her, and just the community. I was always active and things like that. I hung out with my friends and things, but working in the community, doing things in the community. So just always active, just hustle and bustle. That was my life before stroke. Trying to spend time as much as I could with my son that was living in the same city with me. Then I had a son that was living out of state, and a goddaughter living out of state. So trying to blend time, with trying to make family time and things like that. So that was just my everyday.
I get that, because I too, before I felt very sick with leukemia, I too would describe my life in the same way, hustle and bustle, go, 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 go,
Mm-hmm.
Workaholic, familyaholic, always giving so much of myself to others, and always stuck on the autopilot drive of life. And never really realizing the idea of self-care, mm-hmm. or the power of this very moment of right here and right now. I was always looking ahead. What was next? And I always need to fill my time. And so I really relate to what you're saying in terms of the hustle and bustle. You were a caregiver for your mom. I mean, so much, right? So Okay, so we get the picture, busy, busy, busy. And so then how did you start to notice these symptoms of your stroke coming on?
Actually, I did not know. I really didn't have any idea of any symptoms or anything like that. The day of my stroke, it just happened.
Tell us
Um,
about that day. What were you doing?
that day started out just as normal as any other day. I woke up preparing for work, and out of nowhere, I got a terrible, terrible, terrible headache. Um, and it just came out of nowhere.
And were headaches
Uh,
normal for you?
Uh, not to that degree. Not to
Okay.
that degree. I mean, I have gotten headaches, periodically and things like that. My first instance was my first thought was a migraine. I had suffered a migraine years ago, and that was the only one that I ever had. So that was my first initial thought. Oh, this must be a migraine. The only thing that kind of deterred that thought was that I didn't have the aura that was associated with the migraine. So I kind of just went on about my day. I was like, well, yeah, I'll shake it off. And I went and finished doing my daily hygiene routine and everything like that. And uh, I was in the shower, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And I actually sat down in the shower, and
What did it
ma-
feel like, Jeff? Like, was it throbbing? Like, what did it feel like?
it was like a splitting a splitting headache that went down the front and the back of my of my head, and it was just like I had a little blur vision, things like that. And that was the only thing that was like really the telltale that okay. And I still didn't, me being me, still pressed through and finished doing what I needed to do, and actually drove myself to my job because I had a 9 o'clock conference call. So I drove myself to work. Um,
Okay, I want everyone to really pay attention to this, because this is how stuck we get, right? On the autopilot of life, right? You have this crazy splitting headache. It's a different headache from what you've ever experienced before,
mm-hmm,
right? And you're getting this blurred vision. And I was the same way, right? All these symptoms that were otherwise so obvious, but I didn't tune into it either. And we just kind of keep going forward. We kind of,
right.
we deny those symptoms. Like, we see ourselves as invincible,
It's it,
and we
it's
push forward. But we really need to hear, I call it the screams of our body. And I really wish, from me, myself personally, that I had heard my body talk to me earlier. There were so many signs leading up to my diagnosis that I should have heard before, but I waited until it was absolutely screaming. And in fact, I didn't even hear those screams until much later after I was diagnosed. And so we all get so stuck in this pattern, right? Where we just don't tune in to us.
And that's the downside of everything. People, we don't listen to our bodies. And as I was preparing myself for work, I said, well, I'm just going to lay down and sleep it off. And, I'm just going to lay down for a minute and sleep it off. And I just heard so distinctively that, the voice of God that said, get up, keep moving. He said it 3 times: get up, keep moving, get up, keep moving, get up, keep moving. So I got up and I kept moving, and I drove myself to work and started my conference call. I'm thinking, everything is cool. My coworker come in and speak to me. I think that I'm speaking to her as clearly as I'm speaking to you, and she immediately realized that something wasn't right. And got one of my best friends on the phone. They came. Well, she said that I refused. You know. EMS ambulance. So she called one of my best friends. She came and rushed me to the hospital. Once I got to the hospital, they said that my blood pressure was the highest that they had ever seen on record. which
Wow.
was 280 over 176.
Okay, like how is this even possible that we can go on autopilot when your blood pressure is that high? I mean, the human frame, it's so hard for us all to just to tune in and realize, shoot, there is something really, really wrong here. So you have this crazy high blood pressure. And then what happened?
They did a CAT scan. They did a CAT scan. They found out that I had 2 brain bleeds where my headache was. A brain bleed in the front and a brain bleed in the back. So I didn't know at the time what that was, but now I know it was a hemorrhagic stroke. So I was rushed to a sister hospital in another town about 45 minutes away, and they did an angiogram, and that's when to see if I had any blood clots or anything like that. And from that point, I was in a hospital for 9 days in intensive care.
And what do you remember from that?
Basically, I just remember what people told me. The story up until my coworker came, my best friend, my coworker called, and one of my best friends came and took me to the hospital. That's what I remember. Everything else that I relate was something that was told to me because I have no memory of it. And it was from the blood pressure being as high as it was, being transported to the sister hospital in Grand Rapids, Michigan, to being in ICU for 9 days. Those first 3 days, I really have no recollection or memory of what happened.
Wow. And so you wake up, and how are you feeling?
So I wake up and still headache.
The same headache.
Just the same headache from it wasn't so much the same headache, but it was more of a throbbing headache and not an annoying type of headache. It was just persistent. It was just persistent, and it would go, it would come, it would go, it would come. They had me under a lot of medication, so I was always sleeping. And I think that was the only way that I was able to sleep, was that they had gave me, medication to sleep.
It is hard to sleep in that hospital.
And one of the things is that I was they thought I was resting, but I was just laying with my eyes closed, and I heard my brother was there and was asking a lot of questions. Yeah, that's what my brother does. And one of the things that my neurologist said was that I was very lucky, because had I went to sleep, now remember I said that I was just going to lay down and take a nap and sleep it off. What was told to my family and what I overheard was that had I gone to sleep, I wouldn't have waken back up. Mm-hmm. And so from that point, and it was unless I was under the medication for them to have me to sleep, I wouldn't sleep. And so even to this day, there's times like if I get a slight headache, I will not sleep, and sometimes I don't sleep for days.
I see. And what was your function like?
I lost. Well, I had to relearn how to, I had to relearn how to walk. I had to relearn how to write. I was right-handed.
You say this all just so casually, but let's really focus on that for a second. Like, you really had to relearn how to walk. What was that like for you? What did that feel like inside?
It was what that felt like. It felt helpless. Yeah. Not even being able to just go to the bathroom. I'm hooked up. I have a catheter, so I can't go to the bathroom. And and laying in the bed and going through what you went through, you lose. I lost muscle, muscle strength. So, even trying to when they did try to get me up to walk, it was like I needed assistance, and they had to take me very slow because I didn't have that strength in order to walk. And so it was just like, okay, so this is what my life is going to be like now,
I too had this very similar experience from going from, really empowered, this idea of invincible, right?
Mhm.
That we kind of all were before the adversities we face, to this incredibly vulnerable state where we just rely on others for the most basic needs of our survival. And I know I just spoke on stage on Friday about parts of my story. And it was for a group of respiratory therapists who really saved me in the ICU when I came off my breathing tube after my lung transplant. And I thought that first breath would be so magical, right? But I had adopted such crazy breathing mechanisms just to survive before that transplant that I completely forgot how to breathe.
Oh, wow.
And I too had to learn. Like they were so patient with me. One respiratory therapist had their hand on my tummy and another one had their hand on my shoulder. And it was like the most basic elements, right, of breathing, that a gift we also readily take for granted, or just getting up and being able to walk to the washroom. A gift we also readily take for granted. And I'm always saying on this show, right, we can choose happy no matter what is coming our way and no matter what we're facing. And the gift of today truly is such a gift. Like, look at Jeff, 48 years old at the time of his stroke. I assure you, he was not expecting a stroke on his agenda the day before this.
Last thing that I was expecting to happen.
Right? And I assure you, my journey as a 35-year-old young mom, sports chiropractor by trade, still nursing my youngest son, we had plans to go away for a month-long trip the next week. It was my son's 5th birthday party that I had planned out for months, right? Like, these adversities, they come our way and they don't take regard for our hopes or our dreams or our plans ahead. Right. And it can be such a hard gulp to swallow when we are in the face of such vulnerability, right? That we're really relying on so many others for our basic survival needs. And we have a great question here from Dan. How did you get used to accepting help from others? This is a really big one. Why don't you comment on this, Jeff?
Oh, yeah. I still have an issue accepting help from others. It was hard because I would tell you, I suffered with having the brain bleeds. I've suffered some cognitive issues, insufficiencies, so to speak. And even to this day, I still, deal with those. Physically, I'm okay for the most part, but there are still some cognitive issues, and so it's hard sometimes because there are some things that I may not grasp or understand right away, and having someone explain those things to me, or it frustrates me. So, and it's like, I don't like asking for help, but I know that it's part of my new normal, that and to let pride aside to do that. I'm still a work in progress when it comes to that, Dan. I'm still a work in progress.
This is a great question, Dan, and it's really hard, especially for those of us who have been really empowered, right, in our independence and in our success, and then to turn and to be in such a place where we really need to ask for help. And for me, I didn't have a choice. I had 2 babies at home. And when you take a young mom out of the house, oh my heavens, you need so much support to help raise those babies. And I really put that out the very first night that I was diagnosed. I put out an email to all of our supports, all of our contacts. And I said, look, like, we've just got this diagnosis. I'll be admitted into the hospital within hours. Can you please support my husband and my children in any way possible? Cheer them on at soccer, right? Drop off a drop off a meal if you're able to. And I just really put it out there right from the get-go, actually, because then I was able to focus. As soon as my family was cared for, especially like my kids in the terms of their supports that they needed, as soon as they were cared for, then I could focus on my own healing. And we really have to learn through this journey that, as they say on the airlines, we really have to put on our own air mask first before we can take care of others. And I saw this so quickly that if I wanted to be that person taking care of my kids in the future, I needed to get the help now, right? And I also saw myself, I've always kind of seen myself, I've seen myself as like paying that forward in whatever ways I was able and doing all this that I'm doing today. I knew that I would pay that forward. And as we are all able to do, once we're well, we can then help others who are vulnerable, right? And that all comes in time. But we can't do so unless we put on our own air mask first and ask for help. So I think that's a really great question, Dan. And it's all part of, taking down those walls of, empowering ourselves to use our greatest vulnerability as our greatest strength.
And that's where I am now, is realizing that, coming from someone who once thought that being vulnerable was a weakness, I now realize that vulnerability, at least my vulnerability, is and how I choose to portray it and display it is my strength.
That's excellent. Yep. And it's all about creating those self boundaries and owning those self boundaries that we create for ourselves with a sense of pride and dignity, right? This is what I need right now. And I would really appreciate your help, and always being grateful. But also, I think it's really important, even when we're asking for help, to always be of service and contribution in the ways we are able to today. And so for me, that would be sometimes smiling at a nurse, right? And making a nurse's day. But we all have the power to live with intent of making the day better for someone else, no matter what situation we face, and no matter how down and out we are personally, because that rebound effect will also come back to us and help us thrive and rise even higher.
Right. I like to see that as a karma. What you give out, you give back. What you give out, you're gonna get back. And as of lately, and you may see a few people walking behind me, and those will be my support team who actually saved my life.
Oh, I see that.
So those are my two of my best friends, and the reason why I'm here, because had it not been for them, I don't know it would have been a totally different outlook, at this point. And
that gratitude that we have for those people, that comes out too. And I always say, Dan, we rise by lifting others, right? Yeah. And we all have our time to shine, and we all have our time to be lifted.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so keep going, please. You're learning how to walk.
And so it's just trying to, have patience with myself, and that really not going all that well, but trying to remember, when my sons were walking and just giving and being there, and you can do it. So I had to be my cheerleader for myself to say, yeah, you can do it. You can, one step at a time, to get from bed to bathroom door, to get from bathroom door to room door. It's just those little triumphs.
You nailed it. Yeah.
Those little triumphs were what made the difference in learning how to have patience with myself. Being a very impatient person in the past, learning how to display that patience with myself. So
that's beautiful.
So it was a process. It was a process.
Those small, simple steps, right? Like It's like if you put in your mind, oh yeah, I just want to walk, right? Then you wouldn't be focused on the beauty and on the celebration of the gift and of the feat that it was when you just walked to the bathroom.
Exactly.
And you were like, woohoo, I got to the bathroom. But if you were focused on just walking out to the mall or wherever you wanted to walk to, you would have missed all those small, simple steps along the way. But if we don't actually celebrate and recognize those small, simple steps and set our goals realistically with, I want to walk to the bathroom, I want to walk these 3 steps, right? We set these overarching goals that are too big. And that's how we diminish our motivation, right? When we don't meet that goal the next day or fast enough, and we haven't celebrated those small wins because we just didn't even see it.
Exactly. And then sometimes it's like we don't want to see it because we have that view of what we the view that's far ahead, and we're trying to get to that point and not realizing what it's going to take for us to get from this point to that point.
Yeah.
You know, and that saying, a journey starts with one step. And that's what I needed to do. So my journey was starting with that one step of learning how to get from bed to bathroom door.
It's also a lot of taking your focus off that end destination and bringing it back onto the journey, which is so important because all we all have is right now. But if we're so focused on our next trip, on our next goal, on the next job we're going to get, and our happiness is based on that, we're always looking for that next step. But if we bring it back to the power of right here and right now, we can truly find happiness even by walking 2 steps to the washroom.
In that moment.
In that moment. Amen.
In that moment.
Yeah.
And, so, and with the process of relearning how to walk, it was also the process of trying to get things. I mean, I couldn't even tell time. They brought. I couldn't. An analog clock. They were trying to get me to. Okay, so process and just simple story questions. It was like I couldn't do it. I'm looking at the clock and they're giving me this, and it was like, well, if it's 1/2 past, this time, how many minutes is that? And I'm like, I couldn't process that, and that was very frustrating. That was very frustrating for me not to be able to tell time, not to, and have someone, you can, keep, putting that out there and, well, do this. And I had to give myself a minute. I had to stop because, again, the more frustration that I felt, the more stress came on, and it was like that was another thing that did not help the cognitive ability, because the more I got frustrated, the more I got stressed, and it took an adverse effect on my body.
Of course. Well, you have to relearn all those steps. And they say that a happy mind is the mind, and a calm mind is the mind that's most well receiving for a learning state. Right. And you're trying to make all those new connections again. So of course, if you're feeling the stress and that elevated zone, right? Your mind is in this flight or fight zone, and it can't focus on those basic elements of learning.
Right.
So that's a huge awareness that you experienced right there.
Yeah. And also eye-opening, and it took me back to, learning, to a point where, again, being patient and giving myself grace and allowing other people to give me that help that I felt like I don't need it. I can do it. But realizing in the back of my head, Jeff, you need this. You need help. And being willing to accept it. like Dan said, how challenging was it to accept help from others? It was a challenge, and like I said today, sometimes it still is a challenge, but I realize that I have to give myself grace. If I want other people to give grace to themselves, I have to be able to allow myself to give grace to myself.
Oh, I love that. And I always say, no matter what we're going through, strive to be an inspiration, because you never know who is watching.
Exactly.
Right? And who needs you as their inspirational role model on that day. And that also gives us purpose as we're going through our journey, right? I had 2 sets of beautiful little eyes, tiny boys looking up at me as to how I would respond to how all that I faced, right? And that element alone helped me find grace in situations that you would not otherwise be able to find grace in, right? Leading by example. And I knew that if tomorrow wouldn't come, I wanted to be remembered for the way that I rose through it and the way that I made other people feel. And that comes back to that idea of living with intention, helping others smile that day. How do you leave people feeling? We can all have that impact no matter what we're going through in life. The power of a simple smile, or a simple word or a simple gesture or a simple thumbs up. If you can't walk, crawl, whatever you are able to do, live with intent and be of purpose. Right. So how long did all of this take you? Like from not really being able to walk to the bathroom to all that you're able to do today. How long was your recovery period, Jeff?
My recovery period, I was in ICU for 9 days. And even with that, with the relearning how to walk, I walked with the gait. I had a limp. I wasn't able to use my right arm, and I'm right-handed. So that took several months. It took several months. I went through physical therapy. I went through occupational therapy, and to get that strength back. One of the things that I noticed that even to this day, I cannot write for a long time. I get tired and I have to stop. So and this is 2 years post stroke. So I can't write like I used to. I used to write poetry. That creative side of me has gone away.
What have you replaced it by, Jeff?
Being busy. Again, focusing in on being there to and for my residents, and focusing in on my residents, and just being there for that. I do try to write, and get, write down little things. Little things are the neurons are starting to fire back up. There are certain little things that may come and I'll write it down, but it may not make sense, but at least I'm doing something to get it out. And I don't care if it doesn't make sense. I'll write whatever drops into my head, and one day it will all make sense. So what I did replace that with is the fact that the men's recovery group, God put that in my spirit. It was like, well, since I've got to this point, and therapy is helping. One of those things is I lost memory with my stroke, but on the flip side of that, the reemergence of some other memories came into play, and so now I'm dealing with childhood trauma and going through trauma treatment for that. So memories of, I may not remember my son's first day of school, but I remember now, the sexual abuse that I went through, and things like that. So it's now, how can I put it? The trajectory in how I am creating a new me versus creating poetry is what's changed.
I was going to say just that, my friend. I think you should give yourself a lot more credit because the expression of your creativity has just come out in a different way. And gosh, you need to be so proud of what you're and the ways that you're serving now in your creative flair and in how you're helping men recover and really experience trauma healing and open up about their traumas from the past. And gosh, I experienced this myself on my journey. Like I had always buried, I was very positive, very upbeat girl. And I don't even think I intentionally buried these hard emotions. And it's not even that I experienced anything, quote unquote, hugely traumatic, right? But we all have these little hurts along the way, whether it's a breakup with a boyfriend or something, more traumatic, like sexual abuse as you've experienced. And we can talk about that in a second, but we all become rather professional at bearing these emotions and not sitting with those emotions, right? And I believe that over time, when we do that then transfers to mental health issues or physical health, right? And for me, this was such a process. I remember in the beginning of my diagnosis with leukemia, I was like, this is a blip on the path. Come watch me on my exercise bike. What can I get you from my water fountain? Like ice or no ice. I was the hostess with the mostest, serving 60 people a day. This was just a blip. And then fast forward, this nanny comes to take my kids home, and I watched her pull out of the lot with my kids in my vehicle, and I wept for the first time. I wanted to be that person driving home with my babies, right? And I watched my car drive away with my babies. And gosh, I didn't know if she was going to buckle their seatbelts properly, speed or shoulder check on the way home. I panicked. And I turned away from that window and I sunk to the floor. I spoke about this in my TEDx talk very openly. I sunk to the floor. I grabbed my knees into my chest and I just wept. And I wept and wept and wept for the first time, right? Letting out all the hurt from all that cancer had come to steal. And I hadn't done that up until that point. And it's so powerful. But not only did I let out the hurt from all that cancer came to steal, but I then really opened up about my own hurt that I had experienced as a child and through other moments. And I have to say, after crying for 4 days, I came out of that feeling so much more lighter and more free and more alive, even with a 2-month terminal prognosis, than I've ever felt in my entire life. That simple act, not a simple act, I apologize. That act of really opening up on trauma healing and all that we've buried, it is so powerful. And the fact that you're helping other men go through that after all of your personal growth and development, I just think it is so incredibly admirable. I have a question for you.
Yes.
How much do you think when you buried those emotions from your previous history of sexual abuse as a child, how much do you think that your act of bearing those emotions, how much do you think that impacted your stroke or other health complications or how you lived your life before?
I'm now realizing that it has had a major impact on my physical being, because what I'm learning is the more that we suppress things and we try to keep those things suppressed, it gives an adverse effect to your body.
100%.
And it's not. And what I'm learning is it keeps the negativity swirling within your system.
Yes.
And that was what was causing that, and suppressing. And what I realized after suppressing, because again, going through the trauma healing, I have been able to connect with the little boy that was molested and realize the voice that was taken away from him, and learning how to give him his voice back. And that helped me as a man, as the grown man sitting before you now, release a lot of anger, suppressing things, and all of that. You know, uh, um, it dealt with pretty much every aspect, because I suppress those things of the sexual abuse, because you know I didn't want to be teased, didn't want to be talked about, didn't want anyone to know. And so those things hardened my spirit, hardened my heart. And then I go in, and then you go in trying to have positive relationships with people, and positive, and things like that. And then there's always something that is going
Doesn't
to
work.
that it doesn't work. And there's always going to be some type of a trigger, and then that carried on over into my relationship with my son's mother, and then our toxic relationship, as we no longer became, as we our relationship deteriorated, the toxicity and the hostility between the two of us kept rising and rising, and that was something else that was adding on to me, and that was more negativity within my body and within my system and within my spirit, and all of those things have a negative adverse effect to how your body heals. Your body cannot heal when it's in a negative state. Your
Yeah.
body cannot heal when you're in a state of um denial, all
When
of those things.
when we're in that state of denial, we're also in a state of self-judgment
Yes.
and shame.
Oh,
And that
very much so.
self-judgment and that shame, it can eat us alive.
Yes.
No matter what we've been through, that self-judgment and shame can eat us alive. But when we go through this phase of truly experiencing these negative emotions, because risers and thrivers, negative emotions are necessary and essential for our survival and our ability to thrive.
Yes.
And I'll touch on that in a second. They have a purpose, those negative emotions. But when we're going through this process, we can shift. Because you said this so beautifully a few minutes ago, Jeff. You said you could connect with yourself as a child. And what happens when we do that is we eventually lose those walls of self-judgment that we've created around ourselves. We lose that shame, and it turns to self-compassion. And once we adopt more self-compassion for ourselves, wow, miracles happen. And we instantly adopt more self-compassion for everybody in the world around us. And it's a magical, beautiful gift that can only happen when we allow ourselves the space to sit in those negative emotions and create that safe space for others to do the same thing. And when we ditch, I'm a big believer in positive psychology. Don't get me wrong. But the first step in positive psychology, I believe, should always be to be very real about what we're going through first. Otherwise, it's a fake positivity. It's a toxic positivity.
Yeah, I agree.
And if we're not real, let's say the emotion of fear. I coach many cancer clients. Yes. And they all want to say, no, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to survive. No problem here. Yes. But if we're not really real about the fire-breathing dragon of cancer or whatever it is that we're going through, right? We don't affect the behavioral change that we need to do to survive and to thrive. Because I assure you, that state of fear will plunge us into a behavior mode of fight or flight. What am I going to do to affect change in my circumstance and take control of my circumstance? I want to take the power away from cancer and put the accountability on me. So what can I do? I can't focus on cancer, but I can focus on what I can change in my circumstance. I can change my mindset. I can change how I choose to see this. I can change how I fuel my mind, my body, and my soul. I can change how I choose to see each moment, because we choose the glasses that we wear, right? It empowers all these other steps. So I just think you're absolutely incredible, Jeff, in all the ways that you serve and in all the awakenings that you've experienced that have changed fundamentally the way you choose to live each and every day of your life, and how you help other men now do the same. Jeff, how can my audience find you?
I am on Instagram under sincere_solutions. I am on Facebook. I use my family name. My family name on Facebook, but it's Ladon, Ladon, Latin Cochran. And then if you type in Jeff, it should pop up. So those are two of the ways that you can find me right now. I'm not really. I'm trying to expand my social media. I do have a Sincere Solutions page also on Facebook, where I will be updating information about the men's recovery group and then other things that's going on with that as well.
Jeff has been posted a few times on my feed. I just think he's amazing. He's been posted as a Thursday Thriver as well. Check out the feeds. He's just incredible.
And I appreciate it.
I very much admire you, Jeff, and you know that. I really appreciated our connection that we formed. Can you leave our listeners with a piece of tangible, actionable advice?
Tangible, actionable advice is to allow yourself patience, allow yourself grace, and embrace whatever your new normal may be. My new normal is I have to accept help sometimes. My new normal is I may not understand everything and not to get downbeat myself because of it, and just embrace the new normal, give yourself grace, and be patient with yourself.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jeff, for joining us today. This was just lovely. Stay tuned, Risers and Thrivers. We have another great show coming your way. Gosh, we've got the star of the Netflix sensational The River Runner coming your way. He is a professional kayaker, professional athlete who is facing a diagnosis of brain cancer. And you will just be so inspired because it has completely shifted his outlook on how he too lives each and every day. You'll be inspired. We'll start that one at 2. Come back and join us, please. All the best. Rise today, my friends. Have a great day.